Welcome to the deep dive. Today we have a fascinating and slightly jarring assignment ahead of us. We're going to be tracing the trajectory of advanced human knowledge through history.
We are, and we're looking at two parallel narratives that seem to pull in completely opposite directions.
Right. One shows how this really complex information successfully traveled thousands of miles across ancient trade routes.
And the other highlights the catastrophic failure to preserve what was arguably the world's greatest collection of wisdom.
It's a study in extremes, isn't it? It really highlights the extraordinary lengths, the sheer effort it takes to move and preserve specialized knowledge.
Mm-hmm. And you contrast that with the terrifying ease with which it can all be wiped out. Carelessness, conflict, political neglect. It's all it takes.
So our mission today is to understand why one piece of high-level information survived and even flourished while, entire libraries of others vanished without a trace.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's start with an archaeological find that feels almost like a paradox. We're talking about a place called Staraya Ladoga in northwest Russia.
This is near Lake Ladoga and the Volkhov River.
Yeah.
A major trading hub, founded way back in 753 AD.
So by the 8th to 10th centuries, this place was pretty much Eastern Europe's commercial superpower.
It was. And archaeologists there unearthed something, there's something that shouldn't have been there. It was a collection of small bronze weights from that exact period, 8th to 10th centuries.
Okay, weights are common, but there's a catch.
There's a big catch. It's the shape of these weights that just flips the whole script. They were shaped like a cuboctahedron.
A cuboctahedron. That sounds like something straight out of a theoretical math lecture. For those of us who haven't pondered polyhedra lately, what are we talking about here?
It's a geometric solid. Specifically, it's one of the 13 Archimedean solids.
Yeah.
And it's highly sophisticated. You're combining two different types of regular polygons into 6 square faces and 8 triangular faces. And they all have to meet perfectly at identical vertices. It's a complex idea.
And here's the paradox you mentioned.
Here it is. In the 8th to 10th centuries, European mathematicians were completely unaware that such shapes even existed. They wouldn't rediscover them for centuries.
So we have an object that represents this advanced mathematical knowledge, and it's sitting in a bustling trade outpost in northern Russia, thousands of miles from any known center of geometry, and centuries before the surrounding culture could even conceive of it. How does that happen?
It happens because Ladoga wasn't just some local village. It was a central nexus of global commerce. It sat right at the intersection of that major north-south artery.
The trade route from the Varangians to the Greeks.
The very one leading down toward Constantinople. And it also connected to the Volga trade route, which went east, all the way to Baghdad and the Caspian Sea.
Baghdad, the center of the Abbasid Caliphate. I mean, that was the global capital of science and learning at that time.
Exactly. That connection explains the knowledge transfer. But the sheer volume of the trade is what's really stunning.
Get this. Our sources estimate that a jaw-dropping 90 to 95% of all Arab silver coins, the dirhams, found in Sweden, pass through Ladoga.
That one statistic,
Yeah.
it tells you everything you need to know about the scale of this interaction, the speed at which goods and ideas could travel.
And these cuboctahedral weights were an essential part of that exchange. There was this whole financial scheme fueling it, right? It sounds like medieval financial engineering.
And it really was. Ladoga developed this clever 3-part system. Local workshops, often using Arabic tech, produced these beautiful glass eye beads.
And those are in high demand.
Very high demand. So the sequence was, northern Finnish hunters would trade highly valued furs for these beads. Then the people of Ladoga sold that massive haul of furs to the Arabic merchants.
In exchange for silver dirhams. So the cycle was fur for beads, coins for fur.
Precisely. They were using an imported luxury good, the glass beads, as local currency to pull wealth out of the north. Then they'd convert it into the global currency, the dirham.
And for a globalized economy, you need precise measurement. That's where the weights come in.
Exactly. Arab dirhams were valued by weight, not by denomination.
No.
And because of wear and tear, or intentional clipping, merchants needed really accurate fractional weights to get the true value of the silver.
And the cuboctahedron, with all its flat surfaces, provided that precision, which strongly implies the Eastern merchants brought the shape with them.
It points directly to an Eastern origin for the artifact. It's an excellent, stable shape for a weight. What's fascinating here, though, is that making the shape isn't quite as complicated as defining it.
Oh.
You can actually make one from a regular cube. You rectify it. You cut off the 8 corners of the cube until the new faces meet.
So you just truncate it, That makes the geometry feel a lot less intimidating. It's a shape derived from the most basic solid, the cube.
Yes, through a simple process. And yet, that simple concept of rectification was what Europe had completely forgotten.
That's the core of this whole geometry gap. This little object sitting in Sterile Ladoga proves that abstract geometric knowledge was fully functional, fully applied in the Caliphate.
At the exact moment Europe was stumbling through its so-called Dark Ages.
So how vast was this intellectual lag between the Caliphate and the West?
I mean, we're talking centuries. It's astonishing when you realize what the East had preserved. Archimedean solids were known in antiquity, but that knowledge was fragmented. It was the Arab Persian scientists who fully explored and recovered it.
And we have a timeline for this. We know who in the East knew about it.
We have documented proof. A renowned mathematician from the Abbasid Caliphate, Thabit ibn Qurra, who lived from 826 to 901.
Right in that period.
Right in the middle of it. He described the cuboctahedron in meticulous detail. We have his writings, noting its structure,
Yeah.
6 squares and 8 equilateral triangles. A bit later, in the 10th century, a man named Abu al-Wafa Bujani documented its construction specifically in a craftsman's treatise.
So this wasn't just some theoretical abstract knowledge. It was applied, practical. Craftsmen were using it to build things, or in this case, to make essential tools for trade.
Exactly. It shows a cultural prioritization of science. The knowledge was institutionalized, valued for its utility, and so it was preserved.
Okay, now contrast that with Europe.
Well, the rediscovery of these complex polyhedra didn't really kick off until the Renaissance, hundreds and hundreds of years later.
I remember learning the Renaissance was defined by rediscovering lost Greek and Roman works. This geometry must have been part of that.
It was. Piero della Francesca, the great painter and mathematician, described the cuboctahedron in his Trattato d'Abaco in the 1480s or 90s.
That's nearly 700 years after Thabit ibn Qurra described it in Baghdad.
An incredible gap. And it wasn't just him. Luca Pacioli included the geometry in his hugely influential work, De Divina Proportione.
And the illustrations for that book, that's where Leonardo da Vinci comes in, right?
That's right. The illustrations were done by Leonardo himself. His drawing of the cuboctahedron, an empty skeletal version, is famous. It's known as the Exaston Abscessus Vacuus.
Wow. To think, Leonardo da Vinci, the ultimate Renaissance genius, was illustrating geometry that was already ancient history in the Caliphate.
It's a remarkable cultural insight. And the final proof, the formal naming of these solids, didn't come until Johannes Kepler published Harmonies Mundi in 1619.
So 800 years after the Arab Persian scholars had codified it, that tiny bronze weight found in Russia really tells the whole story. Knowledge imported from the East, a clear vector of trade, and the shocking fragility of what had been lost in medieval Europe.
It was a perfect contained narrative.
It is. Now, let's turn to the flip side of that narrative. The catastrophic failure of knowledge preservation. We're moving to the Library of Alexandria, a place dedicated entirely to knowledge, where that knowledge ultimately perished.
The Library of Alexandria is.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate cautionary tale. When it was founded in the 3rd century BC, it was part of a larger research institution, the Mausian.
Which is where we get our word museum.
Yeah, exactly. It was literally dedicated to the Muses, the Greek goddesses of the arts and sciences. It was the world's first university and research lab, all rolled into one.
And the Ptolemies who ran it were, let's say, famously ruthless collectors. Our sources describe their methods as audacious.
That's a kind way of putting it. They send people out to find, buy, and copy every scroll available. They even got a reputation for borrowing originals and then, shall we say, forgetting to return them.
Sending back only the copies, a zero returns policy.
Pretty much. And because of that aggressive collection, they attracted the sharpest minds in antiquity. This wasn't just a warehouse for scrolls. It was an engine of innovation.
Right, think about the people who worked there.
Absolutely. You have Eratosthenes of Cyrene, the chief librarian, who calculated the Earth's circumference with incredible accuracy using just geometry and shadows.
You have Aristarchus of Samothrace, who standardized Homer's works and basically invented the system of diacritics, the accents we still use to read ancient Greek.
Even Archimedes is said to have studied there. He might have invented the Archimedes screw, the water pump, while he was in Egypt.
Yet, the library is almost always remembered for its demise. The popular story is that single dramatic fire. But the sources, they suggest a much more complicated and frankly sadder story of a slow intellectual death.
That's a really important distinction. The idea that Julius Caesar accidentally burned it all down in 48 BC is romantic, but it's misleading.
Okay.
I mean, his fire during the Alexandrian War certainly damaged some part of the collection near the docks, but the institution itself seems to have survived for centuries after.
So it wasn't a sudden death. It was a gradual, agonizing decline fueled by a political instability and neglect.
Precisely. The rot had already started, even before Caesar. You see a purging of intellectuals. Aristarchus, for example, was exiled to Cyprus in 145 BC. That's the beginning of intellectual suppression.
And the real symbolic end came much, much later.
Much later, under the Emperor Theodosius in 391 AD, the Serapeum, which was a kind of daughter library with a huge collection, was vandalized and demolished as part of a purge of pagan institutions. By then, whatever remained of the great library was scattered, neglected, or just lost to time.
And this is where the comparison becomes so stark. We can trace the cuboctahedron, but we can't trace these foundational texts. Let's talk about the sheer scale of the intellectual and cultural catastrophe.
Carl Sagan framed it best. He pointed out that of the 123 plays written by Sophocles that were in the library, only 7 survived. 7. The loss rate is similar for Aeschylus and Euripides.
Imagine if we only had the 7 most obscure plays written by Shakespeare. That's the scale of the vacuum.
It is. And the poets. We have only one complete poem from Sappho, the Ode to Aphrodite. 1. Sources estimate she wrote over 10,000 lines of poetry. Only about 650 lines still exist.
And how did those survive?
Not because they were valued. The surviving fragments were often found reused, written on papyrus that had been thrown out, sometimes even used as stuffing material for mummies in Egyptian tombs.
Her entire body of work, the defining voice of ancient lyrical poetry, was reduced to packing material. That's just devastating.
It is. And the loss extends to really fundamental structural knowledge, too, like the second book of Aristotle's Poetics.
The one dealing with comedy.
Exactly. We lost it. It would have been invaluable for understanding ancient critical theory. Or, in history, Livy's massive history of Rome, Ab Urb Condita, from the founding of the city. It started with 142 books.
And only 35 survived.
We have these massive holes in our understanding of the Roman Republic and early empire just because those texts weren't copied. We're constantly guessing about motives and events because the primary source is just gone.
And the scientific loss might be even worse.
Arguably, yes. Take Democritus, the physicist who developed the concept of atomic theory. He was incredibly prolific, writing works on physics, math, ethics, titles like On Geometry, on irrational lines and solids. Most of his work is completely lost. Historians often call the disappearance of Democritus's knowledge the single greatest intellectual tragedy of the ancient world.
It's hard to even grasp what centuries of scientific progress we missed out on because that foundational thinking just vanished.
You see hints of it in the lost works of Archimedes, things like on sphere making and on polyhedra. They suggest he was exploring concepts that were laying the groundwork for integral calculus.
Centuries before Newton and Leibniz.
Centuries. We also lost unique historical insights. Emperor Claudius wrote a 20-volume history of the Etruscans and an Etruscan dictionary. That would have been critical for understanding pre-Roman Italy, a language that is now totally extinct.
So let's bring these two stories back together. The cuboctahedron, this cutting-edge geometry, travels 4,000 miles from Baghdad to Russia because it was useful, it was valued. Why did the knowledge gathered at Alexandria fail?
The synthesis is simple, but it's really powerful. Knowledge isn't saved by its housing. It's saved by being widely copied, translated, and most importantly, continuously valued across cultural and political shifts.
The cuboctahedron was a necessary tool for commerce in a flourishing civilization that prioritized science. Its utility ensured its survival.
Right. Whereas the massive, centralized intellectual wealth of Alexandria, it ultimately became a political target. It succumbed to neglect, to conflict, and to the failure of later generations to prioritize intellectual inquiry over ideological purity.
So it wasn't the brilliance of the founders that mattered in the end, but the fragility of the political will to sustain it.
We've traced knowledge of a complex shape traveling 4,000 miles, yet we saw the catastrophic loss of intellectual foundations stored right next door. The journey of the cuboctahedron highlights the power of trade as a knowledge vector.
While the library's decline just underscores the fatal danger of centralization and indifference, it really makes you pause, doesn't it? Remember, the cuboctahedron is a shape derived from a simple cube by a process rectification that was lost to Europe for centuries.
And that's the provocative thought we'll leave you with. What common concepts or technologies do you rely on today? Whether it's the basic principle of an internal combustion engine or the code that runs the internet, that might seem utterly incomprehensible or advanced to future generations if our current cultural record fails to be intentionally preserved and widely disseminated.
That's your deep dive for today.